Hey, folks, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring podcast. This must be around episode 200 now that I'm thinking about it, including bonus episodes. Might be at number 191 and 192, but either way, in the 190s now, we're approaching 200. And so I've got a couple of really special episodes to pull out. And with that, I'm starting today, and that is with the Heart Cut. They are a relatively new independent bottler, been around for just under 2 years now, based in London. But they have a focus that really aligns with this podcast, trying to show stories of distilleries and producers from around the world who maybe don't get as much love as they should, or people don't know about them as much as they should. And to talk with me about the Heart Cut, we have co-founder with her husband, Georgie Bell. Georgie, welcome on.
Thanks for having me.
So Georgie has had quite a career. Just to do a couple of highlights, and then I'll throw it over to her to fill in anything I may have missed. At 24, she became a Scotch Malt Whisky Society brand ambassador, one of the youngest ever, if not the youngest ever. Uh, she is a keeper of the Quake, liveryman of the Worshipful Company of Distillers, a co-founder of Our Whiskey, and recently joined, as of last year, the board of trustees at the Wine and Spirit Education Trust, which you might know is the WSET. So many things that you've already accomplished at a relatively young age, I would say. But what else besides that would you like people to know?
That's a very lovely introduction. Thank you. Um, well, well, another cool one for you. So, as you said, I started my whiskey career at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society as their global brand ambassador. Prior to that, I was studying geography at the University of Edinburgh. And I actually ended up doing my undergrad thesis or my undergrad dissertation on whiskey and regional identity, and the creation of an image of a place through the whiskey industry. So I focused on Islay and looked at it as like the Golden Kingdom, and how when we think about Islay, we think of whiskey,
Mm-hmm.
but then how is that actually reflected on the island, etc. So I suppose through that, or through bartending originally, and then through focusing in, doing my dissertation on that at 22, 21, 22, that was when I was like, okay, whiskey, this is my thing. I absolutely love it. Let's go out and see how I can carve a career for myself within it. Because at that time, I mean, that was when I graduated, that was 2010. The whiskey industry was very different to how it is today. And there weren't so many like obvious career routes. I'd say getting a career in whiskey, especially as an ambassador, it's not like um, getting a job in property development or law where, it's kind of like you have maybe, and I don't know this because I've never worked in them, but I'm assuming you have like obvious next steps, right? So within whiskey, there's a really nice, I found there was a way to go, cool. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? So started working at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, still had that education bug when I was there. And so I ended up doing my IBD, Institute of Brewers and Distillers, Fundamentals in Distilling. Absolutely loved it. And so did my diploma in distilling with the IBD over 2 years instead of three, all while I was at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, um, which essentially is like an undergrad in distilling. It's like biochemistry and chemical engineering. Uh, and I was really lucky. I ended up getting the highest mark in the world when I completed that. And that's how I actually entered originally into the Worshipful Company of Distillers. So there's lots of little linking parts in those very early days.
For sure. And the can certainly appreciate the education bug and wanting to know more about it. I hopefully will be doing something with the WSET at some point, maybe the IBD. Uh, it just depends on time more than anything else,
Yeah.
as you well know. Um, with the dissertation, I did not have a chance to look at it. I was trying to find it online because you can find almost anything online nowadays. But I do like it because it gives a good sense of if someone's a writer or has written before, how they think and how you would have approached this particular project. And from what it sounds like, both what you just said and in previous interviews, you're really exploring that sense of place,
Yeah.
to use that term. And I'm curious. I mean, Isla is the perfect place to do that. It's synonymous with whiskey, as you said. Uh, were there? Did you know that immediately like Isla was the place you were going to go? Were you drinking Isla whiskeys and that inspired you, or was there a choice involved as to where you wanted to study it?
Do you want like the full story? I
Yeah,
can
go
I
for it.
can I can keep it quick.
Go for it.
It's a funny one though. Um, so as I said, while I was at Edinburgh Uni, I was a bartender and I loved whiskey, but also really liked tequila. And I originally wrote my dissertation or thesis proposal on tequila and the NOMs and global versus local and sort of the globalization of the tequila industry. And my proposal was to go to Mexico and study that summer to get all my research and then come back and write it. And I remember I came out of one of my third year exams because it's a 4 year course. Came out of one of my third year exams, hadn't booked any flights, but I was about to, and my mum phoned me and she was like, so you might want to check the news, but no one can fly to Mexico at the moment because of swine flu.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, this was 2009, and I was like, oh, cool. Um, right, I will do something closer to home. And by that point, I loved Isla whiskey. I loved whiskey. I loved Isla whiskey. And I thought, right, what can I do instead that's slightly closer to home? I don't, I wish I remembered the exact point in which I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I can't remember. I must have just done a load of research and gone, right, what else am I going to study? And I ended up focusing on Isla. Uh, I love, and again, being a geographer at heart, that whole idea of sense of place, of spirits tasting of where they're from. I think that's actually something that's very much carried forward through to, obviously, we'll talk about later, but with the heart cut and what we do now. And I just I find it so fascinating. Um, the whole idea of how place can tie into not just how it tastes, but also where you're drinking, how that like impacts how you're tasting as well. I wrote in our newsletter this week that um, whiskey never tastes as good as it does when you're drinking it at the distillery in which it's made, right? You know, when you crack open a bottle, or if you're in a distillery bar or doing a tasting, or maybe you're outside Lagavulin and you're kind of like face to the wind by the sea and you're drinking a drink, like that feeling is, oh, it's just phenomenal, isn't it?
I say it often enough that my friend John pokes me about it. That I agree. Nothing tastes as good as it does at the distillery. Even
Mm,
more so if you're with the people who've made it. Um, so I'm happy to taste stuff at a distillery, but if I'm doing a review, I do it at home in a neutral environment because it's the only way to be fair.
yes.
So, uh, but no, I agree with you fully in that. You know, it's funny because you've had a couple of partners that you've had with the Heart Cut that have been podcast guests. So, Stauning, Nick Nean, Cotswolds, St. George. I feel like there were one or two others. You know, all of who have been guests, and actually a few that are either scheduling or that I might ask you for contact later on, like White Peak, Cairo. Uh, I I spoke to someone else in Finland, not Cairo, but I mean, I spoke to a couple of Nordic distilleries, and so anyway, so you were saying so with Isla, um, it also occurred to me that just a couple episodes ago, it was the first Isla distillery that I actually talked to, which was
Oh,
surprising. You get 4 years into this, and the first one, and it was Kilhoman with James Wills, and
oh, they're wonderful, the Wills boys. I shouldn't call them
yeah,
boys. The Wills sons, they're
I
wonderful.
mean, they were boys when they burned down the malting floor, so
Yes.
or the malting barn. So um, that was a fun story. But so you had this love for Isla. Um, I do have to ask, and you feel free to say, it's a favorite child or whatever, but do you have a go-to favorite Isla whiskey?
I do. Um, I also really love Kilchoman. I think it's wonderful, and I went to Kilchoman on my studies. Anthony was super kind, welcomed me in with open arms. I got to go behind the scenes of the distillery. And so Kilchoman will always have like that special place in my heart because of that. So yeah, Kilchoman is up there for sure. It's funny when you say though you're not allowed to have a favorite child, and then you talk about Isla because one of my kids is called Isla.
Oh,
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna say because I don't, that obviously was not my information to share, but no, that is lovely. I love that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I think I'm with you honestly that Killam is probably my overall favorite. Although I will say a full sherry cask maturation Kalila, that's right up there. Um, but anyway, we want to make sure we focus a lot on the hard cut today. And uh, actually, I should before we get there, one more thing, just with your story. So, with doing the dissertation, with doing your following work with the IBD, where you got not only a degree in distilling, but the highest mark in the world at that time. You've said you had a dream of opening your own distillery, and it sounds like you've got the knowledge to do so, and certainly the connections to fill in any gaps that there might be. You have started an IB that is doing wonderful things. Is that distillery starting bug still in you?
No,
All right.
it's not. You're right. So after I worked for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, I moved to Diageo for 3 years, where I was the global ambassador on Mortlach, and then to Bacardi for 8 years, as their global brand ambassador across all of their malts, and then their global head of advocacy. And in that time, I was still thinking, oh, distillery could be fun. And when my husband Fabrizio, or Fab, and I started talking about, what could a business look like, we started talking about this. I remember it was like 2017 is when we first started thinking, oh, what could be fun? And we originally had an idea for a distillery, and we thought we'd built a business plan. But looking back at that plan, it was really just a mood board of what, of what a dream distillery that we could set up would be. But I'm so in love with what we're doing right now and the freedom and flexibility that an independent bottler sort of in that model gives you, that there's so many incredible distilleries out there. I don't have that bug to set up a distillery anymore, not right now anyway, and it's not in the plans. Right now, I really love what we're doing. I love that we've gone through the motions though, of like, I think everyone does, right? Anyone who's a fan of whiskey is just like, cool, it would be really awesome if we could do that. Or what would be the dream distillery, right? And it's fun to have that dream. We had that dream, and now we're living a new dream, if that makes sense.
For sure. I've definitely thought about that late at night. I know exactly what kind of stills I'd want to use, and uh, but I mean that's fair though, because it seems a bug for new experiences. You've been very open. You and your husband love to travel, and you got to travel a lot as global brand ambassador in multiple roles uh, for many years. So I kind of get that too. Like whenever, and this is just a personal thing, like whenever I feel like I'm getting tired of doing the podcast, or I need to take a step back for a second, I'm like, but there are so many more distilleries to check out, and countries I haven't been to, states I haven't been to yet with distilleries, and that kind of reignites it. And no, I'm with you. Sorry, I just remembered M&H, also previous guest on the podcast. So I think I've gotten at least half of your partners on the podcast already, so we might have to go for a full sweep at some point. Um, so last thing I want to ask on your background, separate that is separate from the hard cut, is something that unfortunately we have to. I feel like I have to ask of any woman who comes onto the show, which is, you said as recently as a couple months ago, this is in the spirits business, that you face familiar challenges being young and a woman, then not having not enough experience, and that catch 22 of not enough experience, but not the opportunity to gain that experience. So I'd love to hear just in your words what that experience has been like, and then as applicable, how you're looking to change that.
Yeah, great question. Um, as I said before, when I started in whiskey 15 years ago, whiskey was a bit of a different space to how it is now. Um, a few months back for International Women's Day, I was part of a tasting, and I was hosting a dram or presented a dram in a four dram lineup of a tasting for the Women's Plus Whiskey Night here in London.
Mm.
And we had 55 women in one room. And it was amazing. And that didn't exist 15 years ago. I'm not saying there wasn't 55 women in London who drank whiskey, but
Sure.
that opportunity to bring those people together wasn't quite there. And yeah, as I said before, I graduated from university at 22 with an absolute love of whiskey, wanting a job in the whiskey industry. No experience apart from being a bartender for 4 years, having written my dissertation with this like infectious enthusiasm, one that I think I still have now. Applying for jobs and just being told, oh, well, you don't have enough experience. It can be quite frustrating, as you said, when you're faced with, you don't have enough experience. Okay, give me the experience, you know?
Mhm.
And I've since learned, after mentoring, coaching, working with so many ambassadors, there are things that can be taught and there are things that can't be taught. Um, and if someone today was coming to me looking for a job, who was that person that I was 15 years ago, they would be hired in a heartbeat, because there was a lot there. Um, but in a way, it was really good. So, I mean, I say it like it was a really bad thing. Things happened, and it wasn't that. It was a different industry back then, 15 years ago. I applied for a couple of ambassador jobs. I actually found some emails in my inbox from when I was applying for some. And I just kept being told, well, I don't have enough experience, right? And the people they were hiring, they had pretty much the same amount of experience as I did, but I kind of looked a different way. And that's totally fine, right? It's fine. What, Thankfully, I got a job at the Scotchmore Whisky Society. They hired me. They could see that I was enthusiastic, and I will forever be grateful for them and the wonderful team that I worked with there. Um, and also, it drove me to do better. I think this today with the heart cut too. I think the bar's been raised, and back then there was no seat at the table. So I not only had to bring my own seat to the table, but I had to make that seat. And again, with the heart cut and being a new independent bottler there's lots of independent bottlers out there, and we're doing something very different. As a new player, we have to make our chair and bring it to the table. And I suppose back then, when I was looking for jobs, that answer was education. I'm so happy that I ended up doing my IBD diploma, that I ended up on that course because that excelled me above and beyond. And it also helped me really reinforce that this was something that I wanted to do.
That's wonderful. And I think that's a good segue into this question of what is the heart cut about. As you said, there are a lot of independent bottlers out there. We've had a number on the show just to get an idea of. We've Single Cask Nation was one of the first ones. Impex. Just looking around at some of the bottles I have too, because obviously Lost Lantern, huge fans of Lost Lantern here in the U.S. 80 Rattray, Cadenheads. I think of the other independent bottlers, IBs that I've had on the probably the closest analog is Lost Lantern, just was what they're doing in the U.S. With that focus. That's their focus. It's going to be U.S. distilleries, craft that, as they say, shining a light on distilleries that need more light shown upon them. And you went kind of the opposite track in that, you know, you're London based, but we're going to be like, we're not doing Scotch until Nicknean, the Nicknean opportunity came about. Like, we're doing anything but Scotch. Um, so, you know, on the Uncut and Unfiltered podcast, this was just last month. You said that you've seen how whiskey was changing and had changed over the 15 years that you'd been in the industry, and you wanted to create an independent bottler for 2023, 2024, not for 15 years before that. From when you entered to now, starting the Heart Cut, what do you feel has changed the most about whiskey, and maybe what was the most surprising change?
Yeah. So in that time that I've been working in whiskey, I've seen two big changes. And I think we've all seen these big changes. And from the sounds of your podcast guests, you've definitely seen these changes too. I've seen the opening up of whiskey around the world, the fact that it's not just drunk across the world, but it's made across the world. There's passionate distillers in all four corners of the globe who are wearing their provenance on their sleeve and who want to create a whiskey that tastes of home. They're not trying to make a whiskey that tastes of anywhere else. They're trying to make a whiskey that is true to them. I feel that these distillers, and this actually is something that unites a lot of the distillers we partner with, they have a why not, what if attitude. Why doesn't whiskey come from my place, and what if I'm the one to do it? Right? When we look at Kura in Finland, who I can definitely connect you with, you should speak to them. Stauning, M&H, St. George Spirits, Melbourne, to Melbourne, to Starwood, who we've recently just partnered with, to Filden. They all have this why not, what if mentality, which I absolutely adore. And again, with Nicknean, we see it in Scotland too. So we've seen the opening up of the world. And the second big thing that we've seen change, which I've already spoken about, is the change in the whiskey drinker, right? Whiskey drinkers today are, some of them maybe look a little bit different to how they were 15 years ago. Aside from looks, a lot of us have a different mentality to whiskey than we had 15 years ago. You know, I think, and we're still shifting this narrative now, but, you know, we used to think Scotch, American, Canadian, and some other countries, right? Now we might think Scotch, American, Canadian with lots of other countries thrown in there, and we're able to name those other countries thrown in too. Okay. So world whiskey's opened, and also people are looking for a more adventurous sip, right? We're no longer constricted as much by the Scotch or nothing, American or nothing. It's American, and I'm going to try some Mexican whiskey. And I've heard that Australian whiskey is really good. And have you seen Taiwan? And oh my goodness, there's the Nordics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I went to the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, I was behind the bar at Queen Street. We had 200 odd whiskies behind the bar, and I remember people coming in, looking up, and just feeling like intimidated.
Sure.
So many whiskies. What, you know, you're a kid in a candy shop, but you're also like, what do I go for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a bartender there, we were guiders. We guided people through that range, asking them questions, figuring out what was the right whiskey for them at that moment in time from the bar that was going to put a smile on their face. And we want to do that with the Heart Cut. So with the Heart Cut, we specialize in spotlighting distilleries all across the world through single casks and small batch releases. We have 16 expressions out to date from 14 countries, from 14 distilleries across 8 countries, which is in 21 months is really broad. And I'm going to say, I think that's really impressive from where I'm sitting, because we've made such a conscious effort to like drive it that way, right?
Mhm.
So we've got that breadth, but also being an independent bottler, it gives you the freedom and the flexibility to showcase to the world how you see whiskey. So we're really curating a range. So each bottling that we bring out is a partnership between us and that distillery. We don't buy from, as you would have heard from Uncut and Unfiltered,
Sure.
we don't buy from cask brokers. We only buy our casks from our partner distilleries. And I don't think there's another independent bottler out there who can hand on heart say that. Perhaps Lost Lantern, who are also a massive, massive fan of,
Mhm.
but I don't think anyone else can say that, right?
Mhm.
Every cask, there's total transparency between what the distillery knows, the end drinker knows. And we're doing this to showcase what whiskey is today. And before we started the Heart Cut, because it took us 2 years of building in the background to really figure out what this business was, build a business plan, go through the HMRC taxation, or the get all the right licenses and everything like that. In that time that we were building up the Heart Cut, we were looking around at the independent bottling market. And bearing in mind that I've just described how whiskey is today, when I looked around, I was just seeing that independent bottlers, for the most part, were focusing on Scotch. Scotch is wonderful. I love Scotch. We've partnered with one distillery. We've got a second Scotch coming up for our next release, which I can tell you about. Um, and also, for the most part, there wasn't really much brand information or storytelling, you know.
Mhm.
Big branding on the independent bottler, maybe small typeface of the distillery, cask information, no real tasting notes. How do you know what to expect from inside the bottle? So Fab and I founded the Heart Cut to be approachable, to be collaborative with our distilleries, and to focus on education, to inspire a more explorative drinking experience, and to guide people through this new world whiskey frontier through all of our partnerships.
I just love the idea. I love and the execution. I shouldn't say just the idea. It seems like from what you've done, from looking at the information on the bottles, the information on the site that is available, this is very much. I would still argue it's still niche in terms of the drinker who's going to want that information, but for the ones who want the information, it's there, and that means you know your audience and you're catering to that audience. Um, I
If
will
I
say,
can
yeah,
jump in there,
yeah, yeah.
sorry, if I can jump in there. Yeah, you're right. We're very mindful of like how much information we're putting out. So it's not information overload, right?
Mhm.
Something we also realize with independent, within whiskey, there are people that are real whiskey enthusiasts, and I'm definitely one of them, but there are also people out there who like a whiskey. They might not know all of their facts, right? And they
Mhm.
continue to be faced with all of this jargon. So on the Heart Cart, all of our whiskies are non-chill filtered and they're no caramel coloring. We don't put that on the label. If you want all of that information, you can scan the QR code, right?
Mhm.
All of the information on the label is what retains to what is the whiskey going to taste like, right?
Mhm.
Some cask information, the number of bottles for that cask, but we keep things minimal on the label to basically for pure enjoyment. You want to delve deeper, all the information is there on the click of a finger.
And it's so important is I get asked often, like, what do I do when I go into a liquor store? And my first answer recently has been I haven't been in a liquor store, well, actually until last weekend. I hadn't been in a liquor store in like a year and a half because I had enough. Like I get things from brands, and that sounds really snobby, but that's honestly the case. Like I don't need to buy anything unless I really, really want to. And then I do online most of the time. Uh, but the I want to go back to what you said about being at the Scotch and Whisky Society as a bartender, but more so as a guide. That's really what it was. You were behind the bar. You weren't a bartender. You're behind the bar as a guide for those people looking up and seeing that. And I went to I must have been Queens. It was the London location, um, and like I went in kind of knowing which ones I wanted to try, but otherwise it's extremely intimidating. Even still, like I was in Denver the weekend before last, and we went to a place that had over 2,000 whiskeys behind the bar. And even like having done reviews for over a decade and doing 4 years of this podcast, I still looked at that list and I was like, oh my God, where do I start with this?
Yeah.
Like I'm here once. I am not, I don't have unlimited funds. I don't have unlimited time or an unlimited
Yeah.
liver. So, like, what do you try? So having that guidance really, really helps. Because one thing I've also noticed about consumers from my side is that they've become what another guest, I can't remember which guest, unfortunately, but they said there's a lot more brand promiscuity. You know,
Yeah.
no longer the days where like your grandpa drank Jim Beam and that was all he drank, or Heaven Hill, and we're always looking for these new things. We might have one or two go-tos, but there's also a big move for trying new things, or even maybe your go-to is something that someone else has never heard of, rather than just the big brands. So I love this idea and execution that you've been able to do. Particularly, I mean, the worldwide ones are notable for sure. Starward in Melbourne, M&H in Israel, Germany as well. Um, those are all notable. I would almost say even more notable is, like you said, you didn't do Scotch at first until Nicnean. You have one more coming up, but you did do adjacent. You did in England, Cotswolds, East London, um, JJ Corey in Ireland. So you're still within the British Isles, but you know, there's more to the British Isles than just Scotch. And while I
Yeah.
think of that like automatically, of course, there's more than that. There are plenty of drinkers who don't.
Yeah. What we're trying to do with the heart cut is, as I said, I've worked in whiskey for a really long time. And in that time, I've been fortunate to travel. And in that time, I've been fortunate to discover all of these great distilleries with amazing people behind them and like just great stories of provenance. And as I said at the very beginning, like they're trying to make a whiskey that is identifiable to them, a whiskey that makes sense to them. I love the story of how Kura was founded in Finland, a group of founders sitting around in a sauna drinking whiskey, drinking American rye whiskey, because of course, Finland is the land of saunas
Mhm.
and Finland's national dish is rye bread. And as this group of friends are drinking this bottle of American rye, they're like, for a land known for its rye, why are there no Finnish rye whiskies? That why not? What if, right? I love all of those stories. Meeting people like Toma, for instance, from M&H, there's incredible people that are out there. And what we're trying to do with the Heart Cut is just share those stories. You know,
Mhm.
I want people to discover distilleries through us and then say, hey, actually, I've just discovered M&H. I love the Heart Cuts bottling. I'm now going to explore the rest of their range. That is success in my eyes. And you're right, people are brand promiscuous. We don't have favorites. We have so many whiskeys downstairs in our bar, so many from distilleries all over. And depending on the night, depending on our mood, depending how the kids were at bedtime, right?
Mhm.
Will depend on what we fancy. It depends maybe what beer we're pairing it with, right?
Mhm.
And so, if with the heart cut, we can showcase to people that there are different options out there. I'm not asking you to be brand loyal with the heart cut, but I am saying come and discover something new with us. And we bottle a whole variety of different whiskies, and we don't all like the same thing. I don't expect everyone to like every single bottling that we're bringing out, right?
Mhm.
But what I will assure, and I say this often within my tastings, is that you might not like them all, but you'll definitely find them all interesting, right? And you'll
Mhm.
have ones that you're like, that is amazing. Or you might try the German rye that we brought out from Stork Club. Oh my goodness, it tastes like Black Forest Gatto in a glass. It's incredible. But it's quite far away from what you expect whiskey in a very classic Speyside sense to be. So you might be like, that's not for me. But for others, they'll be like, that's really cool and different. And I can't wait to explore more within that flavor camp, you know? Um, And I think that's what we excel at, is that being that connector between people and distilleries, and essentially saying, we've done the hard work. Let us show you the world of whiskey. Come on in. The water's lovely, you know?
And I say the Stork Club is also one that is on my list for sure. But I want to highlight the M&H one that you did because my two favorite releases from them were the pomegranate wine cask and the Dead Sea Apex collection. And your bottling brought those two together.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's so I first tried both the pomegranate wine and the Apex at the whiskey show in London. I think it was in 2022. And I emailed Thomas straight after, and I was like, I've just tried your bottlings. I mean, who gave them to me? But I was like, these are great. We need to talk. I've got something like I need to talk to you.
Yeah.
Something happening. Let's chat. Um, and he was wonderful and so supportive. So our M&H bottling is a single malt from them, fully matured in a pomegranate wine cask and partially aged in the warehouse by the Dead Sea. And what's awesome is that, I mean, the angel share in their warehouse in Tel Aviv is 9%. Their angel share in the warehouse by the Dead Sea is 25%. It's crazy. So this whiskey is like, oh, it's so juicy. It's got these incredibly rich notes of like medjool dates and cherry pie. It's it's incredible. We were lucky enough to go and visit them as well um, in the May of that year. And the distillery is very cool, and the team are wonderful.
For sure. They as I said, they were also they were early guests actually before I think before the podcast was what it is now, I would say. Like it was still this style, but I'd like to think I've gotten better at interviews since then. So I might want to have them back on and be like, hey, let's do a better one. Um, but so, this is good for the timeline. So, you talked to M&H at or right after Whiskey Show London in 22. You launched the brand, the Hard Cut, in 20 September of 23. Been thinking about it and planning for 2 years before that. Now, this was a hell of a time to launch for multiple reasons. One being that was like I feel like the month that whiskey just started slowing down, and it was a hard hit on the brake to do so. But also on a more personal note, not to get too personal, of course, but the brand launched 3 days after you gave birth to twins.
3 days before.
3 days before. Sorry,
Yeah.
3 days before. So, I mean, obviously, again, I don't want to get too personal where it's not appropriate. Um, I have to ask: was there consideration to either move things up with the brand or move things back with the brand? Also, knowing that you're likely not controlling when you give birth, so that's you don't have an exact date on that. But was there thought to moving the date around for the brand, not the babies? Sorry.
A couple of things. No, there wasn't. I actually had a planned C-section because of the twins, so we did know when they were coming.
Okay.
Um, and I'm really glad we launched when we did, because you'll know this being a new parent yourself, but had we tried to launch the business after we'd had the girls, the Heart Cut would never have launched. Because, I mean, it
Yeah, no,
was
that's
an
fair.
interesting time. Those first 5 months was, yeah, that was interesting and very little sleep. Um, but yeah, so we launched, yeah, the Heart Card just 3 days before we had the girls. Um, I'm so glad that we did. I often think about this. I often think like, what would life look like had we launched the business and not had the children at the same time? I also think like what would life look like had we had the children and stayed and not launched the business and stayed in corporate, right? Those two different areas. Instead, we did both at once. Had we not, so for the first scenario, had we launched the business and not had the kids, obviously that wasn't going to be an option, but just, and if you kind of think about it that
Sure.
way, the heart cup would look very different to how it looks now, probably, but I'm not sure it would look better. We probably, my kids are now in nursery 3 days a week,
Mm.
which is a blessing. I love them. And I also love them when they're looked after by other people for 3 days a week, so I can actually get some work done. Um, but what that's meant is that Fab and I are like so focused on those days, those 3 days where we don't have children. That is golden. We get as much done in those 3 days as I probably used to get done in 5 days, because like when you don't have a lot of time, when you have a lot of time, you fill that time. When you don't have a lot of time, you cram everything in. It's also meant that from a business perspective, we are super focused, especially because it's just the two of us. So it's meant that with the heart cut, everything we do is done with intent, everything we do is done with purpose. And we're a startup too. So from a funds perspective, like everything we're doing is very, very focused on our end goal. Um, I think had we also not had the kids at the same time, we would have probably we would have brought out more casks at a much quicker rate, which wouldn't have been right, not at the time, and as you said, not for how the whiskey industry is at the moment, you know. If we flip reverse it and had we had the kids and not launched the business and both of us still in corporate jobs, we wouldn't ever see our children. We probably wouldn't, we wouldn't, not that we have any disposable income now as startup founders, but we probably still wouldn't have any disposable income then because nursery costs so much over here and there'd have to be a nursery 5 days a week for us to be in jobs. Our work-life balance would be so off. So actually, I think everything has kind of been a blessing in disguise. Everything, as I said, because everything's happened at once. We are really a family business. That everything has meant that we've been really, really focused. It's been great for Fab and I because we're able to have this common goal of the business and the children too. We totally are on the same level. When one of us is looking after the kids, we know the other one is working. So we know that something's always happening on the business. But it also means that with every release that we bring out, with every partnership, with every conversation that we're having with distilleries, with every whiskey club tasting that we're like working on, that everything is done with intent. Um, so I think it's made the heart card a lot stronger, actually, with how we are.
That I like that a lot. So this may feel like an abrupt change, but it's going to the products and about picking which casks you pick.
Yeah.
Um, on and I want to start with the tasting notes. And this mainly because like your tasting notes, as we said earlier, are very accessible. It's meant to be able to just pull a bottle off the shelf, read what what you think it tastes like, what it should taste like, and it's easy. And I say that just because I have to make this comparison, which is with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, where I love them. They've been on too. I have plenty of their bottles, but some of those tasting notes are just way out there. Like, and the same could be said for a number of publications too, where the tasting notes are either like such esoteric words or phrases, or it's a dessert that no one has ever heard of that you got to look up or something. That doesn't really work in a like a liquor store setting or in even online. Frankly, it doesn't work. If you're going to have to look up for the five tasting notes that are on the bottle, you're probably going to put it back on the shelf or not in your cart before you pick something else. Um, so just from your perspective, how do you choose the tasting notes that you're going to put on the bottle? Which
Um,
I know it sounds like a simple question, but like,
no, no. I love the SMWS tasting notes. I think they're so fun. I actually found the opposite. It's interesting you say that because I don't think there are enough people doing tasting notes like SMWS, and I know some of them are extremely obscure and maybe a bit too far in that direction. Do you know what? I got really bored of tasting notes on the back of bottles. If you go into a liquor store and you turn around bottles, you count the amount of times that whiskeys just taste that they say that they taste of vanilla and oak.
mhm. Yep.
That's boring. You know, the amount of times I see that being listed and again, of course the whiskey's going to taste of vanilla and oak. You can taste vanilla and oak in every single whiskey.
Mhm.
We wanted to make accessible, fun, approachable tasting notes that you can go, hmm, I know what that tastes like. I like the sound of that. Or, that one's not for me. I'll try the next one. Again, back into that idea of you might not like all of our whiskeys, but you'll definitely find them interesting.
Mhm.
So if I look at this bottle of Niconian that I have in front of me, we've said it tastes like rum and raisin ice cream, dried raspberries, peach yogurt, walnuts, and lemon balm. And you can go from that with the lead note being rum and raisin ice cream. And you can go, yeah, I know what that tastes like. Yes, that does sound appealing. Yes, I want to buy it, right? And I think that speaks far. Of course, we've got in here that it was finished in a Madeira cask. We've got all of, the distilled, bottled dates, the strength. But you look at those tasting notes, they will help guide you to that whiskey.
Mhm.
And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to use these tasting notes on the bottle as signposts. And the way we go about it is also the same way that we go through some of our cask picks and also our strengths. So obviously Fab and I are trying every sample. We do that at home. Sometimes we try and get to the distillery, but traveling not so much with kids now, although they have been to 4 distilleries and they're going to their 5th this summer. So they're not doing too badly. Um, but when we're trying these samples, sometimes if we're both like dead set on a cask sample, then that's great. If we're in between 2 cask samples, then we have a little tasting group. There's 3 people within it that will either get together or we'll send them samples. One of them lives in Scotland, 2 of them in London. People whose palates we trust inherently and who are just friends of the Heart Cup, but also very well regarded in the industry. They sometimes help us with our cask choices. Um, they'll also help us with our tasting notes. So we've got for our new release that's coming out at the end of this month, we've just sent we before we designed the label, we sent out samples. They've come back with tasting notes. We collate them all together. We then go through those tasting notes together with ours, and we'll pull out like 5 key identifiers, and those are the ones that will go on the label. And our tasting panel also help us with our strengths as well. So I think the M&H cask that you brought up earlier is a great example of this. When we picked that cask, I think it was at like 67 or 69% ABV. Now I love cask strength whiskey, but my God, that was hot. So with all of our bottlings, we bring them down to a strength that is slightly more approachable. Um, and so we'll often try them in the case of that 67% one, we would have probably tried it at like 62, 60, 58, 56, 54, 52. We would have maybe gone, really like it at 56. So then we would have then tried that sample again at 58, 57, 56, 55, 54, right? Going into 1 degree differences. And then try to been like, okay, I think we like it at 57. And then we maybe would have sent out samples of like 56 and 57% to that group again to say, which one of these two do you prefer? Because even 1%, it's crazy. I didn't realize this before the hot cut. I mean, I did, but I didn't. The difference in flavor in just one alcoholic percent is crazy. Um, so yeah, that's how we go about our tasting notes. That's how we kind of you work with our tasting panel, and it's how we go about our whiskey strengths as well.
And with you're picking casks, as you said, you're not going through brokers. It's all with
Mhm.
founders, master distillers, sometimes both.
Yep.
Sometimes they're the same person
Yeah.
with some of these distilleries. Uh, you're so to go to call back to something you said earlier, you are tasting some stuff on site and then tasting back at home for that neutral site as well. Uh, because you're working with who you're working with, and I know so many at this point, they're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. They're not trying to sneak in a bad cask or something
No.
that's so off. But within that, there's some variation that's going to occur. Have you had a a cask yet, or something you've picked at a distillery and you bring home as a sample and you're just like, this wasn't the same? And I'm not asking you to name one, of course, but just that experience of it was so different at the distillery and at home that you were like, I got to go back and maybe do a different one.
Yeah, no, we've not had that. We've it's a great question, but no, we've not had that. We've been really lucky with our cask samples. Also because the distilleries we partner with, having worked in whiskey, a lot of them are friends as well. So we've been really lucky with the samples that we've chosen. Um, I think a great example of this actually is the cask that we picked from Few Spirits in Chicago
Mhm.
with Paul, who is just, have you spoken to Paul on the podcast?
Not yet. Allison recommended him too, so I think I'm going to.
Oh, he's just magical. He's so wonderful. And I mean, I think I look back in my phone pictures, I first visited Few Spirits in like I- 2013, 2014, something like that, like early days. I remember getting the train up to Evanston from Chicago, being like, where am I going? Um, and Fab and I visited Paul in Chicago. We had like less than 24 hours in Chicago, on our way to New York to another distillery to visit. And we went up to Few. Fab hadn't been there before. We toured the distillery. We went into the warehouse and we sat in Paul's office and he picked out four incredible cask samples. We tried all four at barrel strength and then we reduced them all down to bottled in bond strength because he would like it would be really these are bottled and bring them down to 50%.
Sure.
Each of them clarify or can be bottled in bond. And we tried the four again at that strength. While we were there with him, we were like, we really like these two out of the four. We ended up bringing samples of all four home though. And when we got home, we did a tasting with our two tasting panel friends that are based in London. And again, we all went for this one particular one. Um, but all four were incredible. The one we ended up with, just for you to know, was a rye whiskey that was finished for 3 years in a Sauterne cask. And it was phenomenal. He did us so proud with that cask, and we were so fortunate to be able to bottle that. Um, but no, we've not had an occasion where we've been like, oh, this isn't as good as I remember. There have definitely been because some of the distilleries we partner with are quite far away. So we did an amazing bottling from Westwood in Portland in Oregon, which I know isn't far away for you, but for us it
Oh,
very much
it's
is here in the
I'm
UK.
only about halfway there from where you are.
Yeah.
So
I remember we tried the samples. Miles, Master Distiller, sent us some samples. Miles again is a gem. He's incredible. We were sitting on Zoom doing the tasting with him. And we decided on one. We were like, this is magnificent. And it really is. Um, and then the cask was shipped to us via Amsterdam. It had been put into an IBC, so like a plastic container, like food grade, because we don't ship the actual wood because it's heavy, right? And we also want the aging to stop when both us and the distillery are really happy with it. But I remember it getting to our bottler and then them resending us a sample. And I was like crossing my fingers, being like, please tell me this is as good as I remember it to be, because it had been quite a while since we picked the sample to when we actually like got the cask. Um, and it was better than I remembered. But yeah, there's definitely been some of those moments where I've been like, please be as good as I remembered that it was. And they have all been to date, if not more so.
I mean, I want to say lucky. It's also a lot of, it's mostly skill. It's not luck
Yeah.
really. It's mostly skill. It's luck only in the sense that with shipping as it is now, it might take a little bit to get there.
Which is why, again,
Yeah,
we don't ship in
with
barrels.
cast for
Yeah.
sure. So in just the the time that I got left with you, I want to make sure to hit some of the biggest notes here. And one of the more singular things that you do with a hard cut is not only choosing these single casks or occasionally small batch, being a couple of casks. You're looking for something that you said has this gold thread of flavor between what you choose and the distillery's core expressions. And to me, and I ask this of every independent bottler, I always think of independent bottlers as being kind of dichotomous. It's either you want the core of what this distillery is producing, or you want something that's so out there that it's worth trying because it is so different. Like having an unpeated Kalila kind of thing, or that's just the example that came to mind, even though they occasionally will put out their own unpeated. So you seem to do a good job of threading this needle between the two. Of you're not choosing kind of a necessarily the core, like with M&H they have their core range, and then they've got the apex, which both the pomegranate and the Dead Sea came from, so it's like their second tier, if you will. um, but you're also not choosing things that are so out there that someone tries it, loves it, and then goes back to the distillery and is like, this tastes nothing like what I tried. you know so how how do you, and I'm sorry if this is if some of this is going to be repeated, but how do you go about in your thought process of, I want to find something that is neither core nor out there but close enough that you can thread to the original, such that a consumer can try our product, say, oh, I want to try this distillery, and not be completely like, feel like they're bamboozled, if you will.
It's really hard. A lot of people are like, "Oh, you're picking cars. That's really fun. Like that must be really, really easy." And I'm like, I mean, it's definitely fun. It's definitely not easy though. That's for sure. There is a lot of skill and there's a lot of mindfulness that goes behind the scenes and like picking the right cask. And not only that, and I said this on the Uncut podcast, but every cask that we do pick, because we're a new independent bottler, in a very in a market full of like established bottlers, you know, and because we're not maybe going with like the obvious choice of whiskey, I suppose, the bar is higher. The bar is so much higher. So every single bottling that we come out with has to be a banger. Every single bottling has to have that wow factor. There's no two ways about it. Um, we want people to, again, like the Niconian in front of me right now, like I want people to try that Niconian, realize it's been finished in a Madeira cask, enjoy that rum and raisin ice cream note, but also realize that there's this underlying like zestiness in there, and that zestiness that kind of like links back to their core range. I really don't want people to try a whiskey, say that was really, really out there, and then try the core release and go, that was like chalk and cheese, you know?
Mhm.
And that's a really tough thing to do. Um, but there also needs to be a difference between the whiskies that we're bottling and the core range of that distillery. I'm not really answering your question here. It's
No,
really
you
hard,
are. You are.
basically. It's really hard. And what we'll often do, in fact, not what we'll often do, what we always do is whenever we start speaking to a distillery, we'll put a flavor brief together because they know their warehouses better than we do, right? So
Mhm.
we'll say to them, this is because we only partner with distilleries who we genuinely love, distilleries whose whiskey we drink at home, like genuinely.
Mhm.
So we'll say to each distillery, this is what we like about your core range. We love this feature. We love this expression. We love this part to it. Or this is what we like about your story, maybe. And we want to be able to tell part of this story. So it might not connect by the gold thread of flavor might not come through from a liquid perspective, but it might come through from a story perspective. We'll ask them to find a cask or cask examples in their warehouse that fit that flavor and story brief. And we'll also give them a pricing brief as well. Um, we want to bottle it at this price, so this is kind of how much the cask we're looking for. So if you can find a cask that fits within a flavor bracket, a price bracket, and also a timeline bracket, that's the three circles coming together, and that sweet spot in the middle is kind of what we're looking for.
It makes sense. And with, I don't know if this has been with all of the releases, but certainly some, you've been able to do these tastings after the releases with some of the core expressions. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, has that been with all of them, with some of them?
No, we just started that this year and I love it. Oh, it's so nice to be able to do. I mean, I was a global brand ambassador for 8 years. I love talking about whiskey, as you can tell, and also shining a spotlight on these amazing distilleries. We also know that we're working with some distilleries that people might not have heard of before. So, since January of this year, so we started with our JJ Corey release. No, started with White Peak. That was number 10. And then we've done it for JJ Corey, Nicknean, Stalk Club, Starwood. We're planning our one for Fielden at the moment. For the first 20 people that buy through our website, we ask them if they want to join a virtual tasting where we send them samples of that distillery's core range.
Mhm.
We also then advertise some extra spots through our socials. Maybe some trade get involved. Anyone who wants to learn more about the brand,
Mhm.
we send them out samples free of charge and we jump on with that distiller for 50 minutes. We make sure it's really like focused, and it's a chance to learn a little bit more about the distillery and try that distillery's other expressions. So for Starwood that we had the other week, we tried Starwood Nova and Starwood Left Field. And we were also able to talk about the inspiration behind the two Starwood casks that we brought out at the same time. So it's a great way for people to just learn little bit more behind the label, you know? Again, it's a
Yeah.
reflection on we didn't make this whiskey, the distillery did. That's
Mhm.
why we picked the distillery because we love them. Let's try and get them some more love.
Yeah, I love it. I'm a huge fan of that approach. Uh, uh, you know, for distilleries or even NDPs to come on, there's no. I make it very clear. There's never a requirement to send me any product. Like if I think your story is worth telling, I'm gonna have you on for that. But if they do offer to send product, I'm like, whatever you send, include at least like a 50 mil sample of your core because I need to know like what I need to know the context of what I'm tasting. Um, for Nick Nean, I mean, I have their core single malt, which is great. So now whenever I get in like the Aeon series, they did an Empire cask that was local to us, and now the Huntress, the Orchard
Yes.
Cobbler Huntress from last year, and then the lemon one for this year that
Yep.
hint hint I should be getting very shortly to try. Uh, I can appreciate those a lot more because I've tried the core, like you said, that lemony, zesty malt underneath. And then I can also tell sometimes if it's been not necessarily with them, but if it's been like over finished or if I can't taste the malt underneath or the flavor unique to that distillery underneath, then I know maybe it's been finished too long
Yeah.
or it was too strong a cask or something like that. So, which I find I gain so much more appreciation for a whiskey and a distillery through that. So I really love that approach. And it's also a testament to your connection and the work you do with the distilleries that they are then willing to put in that extra time to give their distiller for an hour, give their founder for an hour to talk about these things. So I also have to respect obviously the time constraint of like I'm going to keep it at 50 minutes, which is awesome because I do an hour and a half, and even then I'm usually not through all the questions before I finish. So I appreciate that.
We just do it for 50 because I'm like, we do these tastings at 7 p.m. after I put the kids to bed. And I'm like, and also we we do it through Google Meets and they cut us off at an hour because we don't use a paid platform. So we say, right, 50 minutes, super targeted, 7 to 7:50. Keep your dinner warm in the oven. You can have it at 8. It's all scheduled. Have a beer by your side. Make sure you've got two glasses, your whiskey samples. a nice way to unwind before the rest of your evening.
I respect that startup mentality.
Yeah.
If you can do something free, you got to do it. I'm 4 years in, I'm still doing that. So no shame at all on that. Um, so just for the in the last 10 minutes, I got, because I want to leave a couple minutes afterwards just to I always leave a couple minutes afterwards just to talk on a couple of things. Um, I want to look at what do I want to look at. Hmm. Let's jump into the partners. So you had a dream list from the start, and as I think again we come back to that Uncut Unfiltered podcast, I think you've crossed off all but one at this
Yes.
point. Uh, is that last one? Well, let me just put it the way. Are you willing to share what that last one is, and is it that Scotch one that's coming up?
Um, no, it's not the Scottish one that's coming out. So we called it when Fab and I were planning the hard cut, we drew up our wouldn't it be cool if list.
Mm-hmm.
And it was our wouldn't it be cool if we could partner with this distillery or that distillery and because we were told before we started the hard cut that our business model was null and void because distilleries wouldn't sell casks to independent bottlers directly. And we were like, okay, cool. Well, we'll just try and challenge that. Um, so we've been really lucky. So we've got 16 releases out today, 17, 18, and 20 have all been bottled. 17 on the way at the end of this month. And then 18, and we had to do 20 in advance because it had to be bottled in the place that it was made, which is cool, without
And
giving too
also a
much
hint.
away. Yes, without giving too much away there. Um, 17 I can actually say is from Lockleigh,
Oh, okay.
Scotland. Yeah, and we're really lucky with this cask. It's incredible. The one distillery, and a lot of those distilleries on that list came from like again visiting places in the past, and distilleries that we just absolutely adored. So our first distillery was Stowning. I'd never been there in the past, but we visited to pick our cask. It was such a magical moment buying that first cask as a business. We have videos of, well, Fab's videoing, I'm driving, and he's like, we've just bought our first cask. Um, our second one was from East London Liquor Co. because we used to live in that part of London and it was our local distillery and we loved it and we still do. And obviously on that list were distilleries like St. George Spirits in San Francisco, who I absolutely adore. Visited the distillery twice in my time and just wanted others to be able to discover it. That was definitely one where we were like, they won't partner with us. There's no way they're going to partner with us, but no way. And then they did. They got back to our emails and they did. And it was their CEO at the time who took a chance on us and was so kind. Um, so yeah, we've been really, really lucky. And actually, since writing that list, more have entered that list every time we have a conversation where like we get told about newer distilleries or we're in whiskey bars and we say to bartenders like, who's exciting you at this moment in time? Who should we be exploring? Or we're looking at Indian whiskey at the moment. So we're like, cool, trying different ones, speaking to a few distilleries. The one distillery that we haven't been able to partner with to date has actually been Cavalan.
Okay.
They said that they don't sell to independent bottlers, but they did send a very lovely email back saying that they liked our bottle design. So I'm going to count that as like a half win, and that's totally fine. Maybe one day,
Maybe one day. You
maybe
never
one day.
know.
But we've been really lucky with the other distilleries that we've partnered with today. Really, really lucky. And what's really nice now is that we have distilleries coming to us too, saying like, "Do you want to collaborate? Let's do something together." Which is just so nice because I feel like that, along with the awards that we recently won, is just a way of our industry and the whiskey industry saying. It's like a pat on the back. It's like a good job. You're doing the right thing. We want you here.
Absolutely. It's another testament to the work that you've already done, the reputation that you've gotten both through the business, and I would have to frankly assume both of your reputations from before the hard cut as well,
Yeah.
that you know what you're doing. You're not going to you're not going to screw over a brand, to put it bluntly, you know. And but I love that too, because you're buying directly from the distilleries, because you are spending this extra time with them to get out to an audience. Distilleries who, because I've talked to a lot of small distilleries, particularly here in the US, who are like, we really had to struggle to find a distributor because the distributors, they've got these massive companies on their rolls. Who's going to find a space for us? And even the ones that find a space for it, that's great. And kudos to them, but maybe it's just in one or two states, you know. So I'm looking at it from the US lens of the three tiers and all that. I know it's slightly different really everywhere. We're just the worst when it comes to that. But you know, it's I think when you have that immediate buy-in, and even that what's the word I'm looking for, that positive buy-in, let's say, where the distillery is coming to you to say, we know that you can help us, we want to work with you on this. I mean, it must feel fantastic.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice. And it kind of like everything that I've done in my whole career has been about like story telling, sharing the love of whiskey. Same with Fab as well, right? From a drinks perspective. So
Mhm.
it's really nice that that's almost like our pay it forward thing as well. It's like the hard cut, we're a business, we're also a force for good. We're an exploratory, we're here to help people explore, but we're also here to share stories of distilleries that we love because we're like, you deserve, you need your story needs to be heard, you know. And we're a small fish, we're a tiny fish, we're a startup, you know, but even just a little something sometimes can go a long way.
For sure. And I love the pay it forward angle. That was it foreshadowed last question I'm going to ask on air. But just before I ask that, I know at the moment not available in the US. um,
You can order through Master of Malt and the Whiskey
okay.
Exchange, and they ship over to the US.
Oh, they
We've
okay.
had discussions with a few
Yeah.
people, but I think the US is just too big for us right now. I would love one day
Yeah.
for us to be there. Right now, we're focusing on um, the UK and Europe. We've just started to self-distribute across 6 countries in Europe because also finding distributors as a small brand is not easy. And it's a good, I'm really happy with the approach we're taking actually. So there's a strategy behind it. But yeah, for the US, it's through Master of Malt and through the Whiskey Exchange.
And that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's we've got 50 markets here, really more. It's and even if that were too much, also just from the supply side, you're doing single casks and a couple of small batches. Like there's not a lot to go around. So I completely I get it. Like
Yeah.
and I'm gonna be sure to look at Whiskey Exchange and Master of Malt. I'm so thrilled. It's been a few years now that they've done that, but I'm thrilled that they're shipping to the US again, because there were a couple years they didn't, and they
Uh,
had all the good stuff, and they
yeah. So
couldn't get it.
yeah. So both of them ship to the US. I think there's just some states that they don't ship to, but for the most part, they ship to a lot of them. So yeah.
There's always 8 or 9 that don't accept anything. It's even
Yeah.
internally, it's the whole thing. Anyway, just to close out, so we have a couple minutes after. You hinted at this with the pay it forward angle, but you're still a relatively new company. So it's weird to ask about legacy in some ways for that, but you've also been very clear about what image you want to present, what image you want the hard cut to conjure when someone hears the name. Plus, you're also doing more than just the brand. I want to say, like, I really look forward to the white paper that comes from the panel you hosted back in March, on what drinkers really want. Uh, so there's more to it than just the great bottlings and partnerships. So as you're looking forward into year 3, 5, 10, what do you want your legacy to be right now?
Right now, and I said this before, but I think when people think of us, I would like them to think I discovered a new distillery through the heart cut. That cask pick was exceptional. I'm looking forward to exploring the other whiskies from that distillery, and I can't wait to see what the heart cut brings up next. Right?
Mhm.
That's my current legacy piece. What I'm also loving, and this is kind of sidestepping your question, but kind of answering it. What brings me joy as well is when other independent bottlers bring out more and more whiskey from a world lens. That is exciting to me. And I'd like to think that the work that we're doing, maybe some people are sitting up, you know, and taking notice, which is cool. Um, but yeah, I think as long as as long as the heart cut stays like synonymous with discovery, exploration, and absolutely killer cask picks. Like we put so much work into these cask picks, I can't even tell you. As long as that continues, then I'll be happy with our legacy going forward.
Love it. Well,
Yeah.
Georgie, thank you for spending the time today. Thank you to Allison for the introduction as well. I asked her at the end of the interview who I should talk to next, and you were the immediately came to mind for her. And
Just wonderful. She's
I'm
wonderful.
very glad she did. Um, hang on with me for just a moment after we finish recording. There's going to be information on where you can buy, where you can follow, where you can sign up to the Heart Cut to see where releases 17, 18, and 20 are coming, and then hear about 19 when that one is revealed. And again, just Georgie, thank you for coming on and spending the time. I really appreciate it. Like and subscribe wherever you listen and look for this to go live. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all next week.